Hey, everybody. Welcome to Grilling at the Green here on the Golf News Network, AM 860 in Portland, on iHeartRadio, on a couple of stations in Texas and Oklahoma, and a few more coming down the line. We'd like to thank the folks at Painted Hills Natural Beef the way nature intended. In fact, my guest today, I owe her a couple of steaks, but we'll talk about that later. And also the folks at Birdie Ball back there in Colorado, John Breaker and his crew. Birdie Ball is a great practice tool. If you've never seen one or hit one, they look like a oversized napkin ring, but they can really help you with your practice in the backyard. So check it out at birdieball.com. Well, there's a new book hitting the shelves here in a couple of weeks. It's a great book. I've read it. In fact, I read it like 1.5 times. It's written by Lisa Cornwell, our guest today. Lisa's been on the show, and her co-writer is a friend of the show too, Tucker. Sorry, my nose did. Sorry about that, Tucker Booth. And the name of the book is Troublemaker, and that's a handle that Lisa kind of got branded with, and I think unfairly so. But Lisa, welcome. That was a really long-winded intro. I'm sorry about that.
It wasn't. No, you had to scratch your nose, Jeff. That's that's important, and I understand because I've been doing yard work and forgot that you were doing this on video. So I apologize to your viewers that you're wearing a hat and I'm representing my Razorbacks. So it's, I guess it's all good.
It's all good. It's all good. So let's just kind of start at the top here. How long did it take you to decide to write this book after you left Golf Channel?
It took a little bit. I reached out to Tucker not long after I read a profile that he did on Michael Whalen, who was the first executive producer at Golf Channel. And the writing really captivated me. And I thought, before I reached out to Tucker and I read this, and I thought, well, maybe this is a good way to tell my story, because I was having a difficult time fully explaining it. And now that you've read the book, you probably understand why, because it was just this series of microcosms that just kept happening over and over that led to some bigger occurrences. And if you tell one of the stories, it sounds bad enough, but when you put them together, it's kind of like dominoes falling and watching all those dominoes fall together. So I thought that it was something that was worthy of a book. I certainly knew that my story was worthy to tell, no matter, because so much has happened, good and bad, like all of us. I think we all have a story. We all have a book that we could write. It's just what motivates you to do so. And I wanted to get it out there. I mean, for me, it was very cathartic, but also for other women who have had similar stories. We say this in the book, Jeff. You talk about sexual harassment, and it's front page news. My case is not sexual harassment, and so it's not this sensational story that that you see with the Harvey Weinstein, or that we've seen recently with some other folks. So it was just something altogether that I wanted to tell for a multitude of reasons.
Well, absolutely. And your tagline in this is a memoir of sexism, retaliation, and the fight that they didn't see coming, which good for you on that. But as you were writing this book, because we'll get more into the specifics as we go through the show here, but what emotions did you go through when you were writing this book? I mean, it had to be a bit of a roller coaster at times, because you've got great parts in the book where you talk about your life and your family and golf and all the good stuff and Sarah and this and that. And then you got to step over and kind of tell the other side of the story, or what was going on. So it had to be like that.
Yeah, it was, but it was really good. There was anger, but I think most of the anger was really there before we started telling the story. So I had let a lot of that out. And I think a lot of people, especially those folks who don't know me, they probably have a mischaracterization of me.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not an angry person whatsoever. And I'm not a, people like to use that word victim. I'm nowhere close to a victim. There are a lot of women who are victims because they have really been subjected to kinds of abuses and harassment that they simply cannot fight back on. That's not the case with me. I've always been a fighter and a challenger. So but no, it was great. Parts of it were hard, but not the Golf Channel part, because I had become quite used to telling that story. Now, I hadn't told it in the depths to which I did in the book. I mean, I reveal a lot of things in the book, Tucker, and I do that I haven't revealed publicly until now. I've never talked about, my personal disdain with Brandel Chambly and why I don't think you should ever cover a women's golf event. I reveal that story there. That's never been told before. I've never really talked publicly about Sarah and what happened in Thailand that led to Golf Channel taking me off of a tournament and then going, oh, wait, hang on, this is a major HR violation. We have to put her back on.
Yeah.
Never talked about that before. So it was really freeing for me to be able to tell some of those stories and let people understand where a lot of this anger came from. And, I will always say that it's justifiable anger, and I'm proud to get it out there.
Well, you did a great job with the book, both you and Tucker, but you did a great job. By the way, the cover photo is stunning. I just gonna,
I had not been doing yard work that day. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just terrific. I told Tucker the other day, he put out a post and he said that he had been blocked by Brandel. And I said, buddy, wear it as a badge of honor. And he laughed about it.
Think about this. And it's funny because somebody told me, they're like, why didn't you put this in the book? And it's simply, I forgot. You always, I think, look back and you're like, oh man, I missed that. But Brandel blocked me while we still worked together. I mean, think about that. So we worked, I had to host a show with him one time when he had blocked me. It's just so weird, I don't know.
This isn't going to be a bash Brandel show, but he is deserving of a few bashings from his behavior and the stuff he does and all that. So that's just, I don't know the man. I've never met him. After this show, I probably will never meet him, and that's just fine. But it's that, excuse me, you said in the book that one of your chapters is, you said it was a dream job. And I could see that, you worked your way up. And we're going to talk about that journey in a bit, but all of a sudden you're at Golf Channel, and that, I mean, you had to be like a kid in a candy store when you first walked in those doors.
Yeah, I absolutely was. Although I will say I was nervous. I felt the pressure because a lot of people who I had known for years and who knew me as a golfer, they were now going to see me as the first time as a broadcaster. And it was a little unsettling. And, I talk in the book about some anxiety issues that I've had in television. Actually, I've had them in golf. I think that they probably all carry over to the same thing. But yeah, I felt a lot of pressure in the beginning. It took me a couple of years before even though I'd had live television experience, before I really felt comfortable. And I think I put more pressure on myself because those expectations were even higher because of my history in the game. And it's funny to look back on it now and I think, oh my gosh, I was so nervous about that. And it was just something so simple. But it's, it's part of the journey. I wouldn't change any of it, including the mistakes that I made along the way. They're all sort of life lessons and part of my story, I guess.
Yeah. I still, and I'm in television stations a lot, I still kind of get the wide-eyed look when I first walk in. After you get down to work, everything's kind of, yeah, okay. But I still get that. It's like, I can't believe they let me do this. So it's kind of fun. Through all of this, and I know there was some apprehension and stuff about your folks and different things that happened along the way, but they've been very supportive of you, haven't they?
100%.
Yeah.
I'm really blessed. In fact, my parents have been here this past week. They just left yesterday. There were some things early on in my life that weren't easy. And, to be able to go through questioning my sexuality and, I was raised in a Southern Baptist household. So, but I think times have evolved, people have evolved, and my parents are so wonderful and so supportive. They've been, they've been my heroes for most of my life and still are. And I think really have, not to be cliche, but have really made me the person that I am today. And I couldn't have done any of this without them. But even this journey of speaking out against Golf Channel, and my dad's he's exactly like me. That's where my sister and I get it from. But my mom's very reserved. But even my mom, knowing this story, was 100% in, saying, yes, you absolutely have to tell your story. You can handle the criticism, go do it. So
Good
I'm
for
very
you.
grateful. I'm very grateful.
Good for you and good for them. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back here on Grilling at the Green with Lisa Cornwell and her new book, Troublemaker, which is hitting the stands. I was very fortunate. They sent me a review copy, and it's still on my desk. It's not going anywhere. Anyway, Lisa and I will be back in just a minute. Don't go away. Welcome back to Grilling at the Green. I'm JT. We'd again like to tell you that we're talking with Lisa Cornwell today. Her new book, Troublemaker. It's a memoir, and there's a lot of stuff in it. You could do a 4-page description and not even cover everything that you put in this book, Lisa. Well, like I said, this stuff there's right and there's wrong. And people tend sometimes to justify their behavior in their moral compass. And it's like, man, your moral compass has not been pointing north for a long time. So I look at things that way. When you made your journey to Golf Channel, and everything you did getting there, would you change any part of that on reflecting back, or was it just a great adventure getting your foot in the door at some smaller TV markets and then working your way up?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't change anything. I don't think that's I don't have regrets. I mean, obviously there are things that you would like to do better or do differently, but I wouldn't change it because it's just part of the experience that I had, and
yeah.
sort of led me to where I am today. So no, I don't have any regrets. I'm just thankful to have had the opportunities and the experiences despite the bad stuff that I wrote about. I still have wonderful friends from Golf Channel, incredible lifelong friendships that I will always have. And I'm talking about people who still work there, and they made that job special. It wasn't just the game of golf, it was the people who were there, and those of us who have been around the game for most of our lives and love it and appreciate your coworkers and treating people with respect. It's like with any job, there's just a small handful of people who really made, at least for me and some other women, it was a living hell. And it got worse. The more that I spoke out, the worse that it got. It was almost like they were challenging me to, like, daring me to speak up. And I took their dare.
Oh, well, I think you did a good job. What was a normal day like, just to give the listeners some perspective, but what was a normal day like at Golf Channel before all this other stuff started happening? When you first went there, what did you do? I mean, I don't think a lot of people know what TV people do, other than they say, oh, the camera's on, and they stand there and they talk, or they sit there and they talk.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more goes into it.
Yeah. So, well, really, my days were the same either before or after some of this stuff started happening, because, I still had a job to do. And, I could not let them affect my performance, because if they did, then everybody else would see it, not knowing what was going on with me.
Sure.
So there were times when I did have to put my head down and just do my work. Excuse me. It would depend whether I was in studio. If I was in studio hosting Golf Central, we would get there around 11 for a production meeting. The meeting would last 30 minutes. And then really for me, I just start researching and writing my scripts and going through the whole process until about 4:30, when I had to go to makeup and get ready. And we would go in the studio a lot of times early, 5:30, and pre-tape some segments. Not really full segments, but just some interviews. Sometimes it just depended on the show. And then the show was always from 6 to 7, and then out of there soon after. So that was that. If I was on the road reporting, it was much different. So obviously you don't have this big production team. You just have you have an on-site producer, a field producer, and your camera and audio folks. And that's just getting out there, talking to the players, talking to the coaches, talking to the caddies, trying to get a vibe for the stories. I mean, as a golfer, I would want to get out and check out the golf course too, and talk to whomever I could about the conditions and what they would be facing. So yeah, it was much, very different compared in studio and on course, but I grew to love all of it.
What was the first time you may not have verbally acknowledged it, but in the back of your head, you kind of thought, wow, this is a good old boys club here. Their behavior, the way you were treated by, and it was not everybody on the Golf Channel staff. There was a handful of people that were kind of centric in this thing. But when did you first know that, like, started to question?
Well, you could kind of sniff it out early. I mean, there were a small group of guys who had been there for a long time, and it's not that they were rude, they just weren't real welcoming. They didn't make the show communication that easy, kind of talk down to you. That was fine. I mean, look, you're going to face that in TV, especially sports television. As a woman, I just, whatever, I just did my job. And if something little happened, I would challenge them, but you just kind of go with it. That wasn't a big deal. And then when I started having some reoccurring issues with Chambly, which I talk about in the book.
Oh, yes.
And he was really close with that group of guys. So you could sort of see it all kind of coming together. There was this interwovenness between all of them, sort of like, we've been here for years. This is our territory. Don't come into it, which I thought going in there, as a long time television person, and certainly somebody with the golf resume that I have, you would think that you wouldn't have to fight some of those battles as a woman, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter what I had accomplished in the game. It had no bearing that I was a 2-time All-American or, had won amateur titles, or they didn't care. I was just a woman trying to, trying to step on their toes is how they saw it, I guess. I don't know, but it's very common. It's common in sports media. I think any woman would say, oh yeah, yep, we've all experienced it.
Well, you weren't the only one. There were other women that were, maybe they weren't an anchor, but they were reporters, or they had, special piece assignments or something like that. And they, over a series or a piece of time, got the same sort of treatment that you did and were forced out. But they didn't want it to make it look like you were forced out, but they were forced out,
right.
Like you were forced out. I don't think you really wanted to go, but you were forced out. And that just sets a tone for everybody that works there.
Yeah, and like a lot of these stories I didn't know about until after I spoke out. And, people come to you and tell you what had happened to them. So I think it's kind of that I never really understood, not that I rejected it. I completely accepted the notion of Me Too. But the whole Me Too movement, you get it because, oh, it happened to me too. And you start, I mean, I'm talking about dozens and dozens of women, Jeff, who reached out to me with their own stories. And like I've said many times before, some of them were much worse than what I dealt with. And, I do talk in detail about a couple women who dealt with their own issues. One person I name, one person I don't name because she didn't want to be named. But it's just incredible. When you see it happen once or twice, you think, okay, it's just a random occurrence. But when it happens time and time again, and it's happened over the course of 20 or 30 years, now you're talking about a real cultural situation of this sort of behavior.
Yeah.
And, like I said, the worst part was that my boss who hired me, who was basically allowing this stuff to happen, was a woman, which makes it 100 times worse.
Yes.
But again, you get a lot of women in these positions and they want to be part of the boys club too. They don't want to be this feminist in the, in the big chair. And all of a sudden it looks like, they're trying to totally dismantle the system or the way of doing business.
Sure.
You don't have to do that. All you have to do is to be fair and expect people to treat each other the right way. It's not that difficult, but it didn't happen. And it happened repeatedly on her watch.
Yeah, well, that's very unfortunate, but you're absolutely right that, it's got to be a level playing field for everybody. And I'm not talking about on the golf course. I'm talking in the office. We're going to take a break. Lisa and I will be back, talk more about her book, Troublemaker, here on Grilling at the Green. Welcome back to Grilling at the Green. I'm JT. We got Lisa Cornwell with us today, but first we need to thank our folks and our friends at Painted Hills Natural Beef, beef the way nature intended, and also Birdie Ball over there in Colorado. I've got a lot of birdie balls floating around in my backyard, so I invite you to do the same thing. Go to birdieball.com. If you want to email us, because we're on all the social media platforms, Facebook, our own websites, just go to info@grillingatthegreen.net. So now we've got that, but we're talking to Lisa Cornwell about her new book out here. Golf Channel partners with the LPGA, and you and I have talked before. You've been on the show before. We've talked privately about that. I don't think that the LPGA gets enough coverage or the right coverage. A lot of times when they're airing those tournaments, it's 9 or 10 o'clock back east. It may be 7 o'clock at night here, our time like that. But did the folks that you write about in the book, did they kind of just turn their back or a cold shoulder to the LPGA broadcast versus PGA Tour stuff? I mean, did they really say PGA Tour is the top level and we don't really care about this over here? Not the production crew. They're always good to work with, I think, but some of the on-air talent.
Well, the on-air talent doesn't really set the agenda. That is more, well, first of all, you have, in terms of live broadcasting, they have contractual rights.
Right.
I don't think that the contract that the LPGA entered into did the tour any good service. I will say, in fact, I think that it's a detriment. Like some of it you can understand. Some of it you have to justify. The PGA Tour, obviously, the ratings are much higher, but there are ways to respect the LPGA Tour in terms of the news coverage and live broadcast coverage. I was really part of the news coverage, and I can tell you that the LPGA was just an afterthought. So if you had not to get too technical, but if you had a 6-block show, which means it's 6 segments divided into commercials, the LPGA always had this placeholder for the 3rd block, and that's where it was, unless there was something really big going on. So from a news side, it was just this everyday mentality of, we're just going to push them back and not tell any stories. And it just wasn't creative in terms of the production. And I would always fight to get something in the 1st or 2nd block, even if it's just a little bit, and you could tease it for the latter part of the show. The LPGA has never had a full-time reporter out there. I mean, I used to have to beg to go to any non-major, and it didn't happen that often. The first couple of years I was there, we didn't cover the Solheim Cup. We didn't cover the International Crown. It just took time for those things to sort of happen. And I'll wait and find out today, but I don't think that Golf Channel is sending a reporter to this week's International Crown. That's what I've heard. We'll wait and see. I don't have that verified. But so it's these regular occurring slights to the tour that should not happen. Now, I will say the LPGA should challenge it, and they don't. And that part of it drives me crazy too, because I think that they have a bigger voice than they're using. Yes. They pay Golf Channel to broadcast their events. So there's that. But then on the live production side, I mean, it's really just, it's simple producing. It's a lack of cameras. It's a lack of good quality audio. It's a lack of, the proper time slots. This past week was a great example. They stayed on the PGA Tour. John Rahm and Tony Finau were still on the golf course, and they just pushed the LPGA back 30 minutes and pushed them onto their streaming platform. I mean, there's never been an alternate network. A lot of folks don't even know how to, my parents wouldn't know how to access Peacock.
Right.
They don't even know. Peacock to them is, you know, a piece of art and a bird. So they're just not using the creative ability with the modern day technology to really promote the tour. But again, part of the blame does exist with the LPGA tour by not pushing back. And I have had this battle with them for years. I have pleaded with them to fight this battle. You know, I can only do so much on Twitter, and those of us who do speak out about it.
Right.
But, you know, at some point it has to change. So,
well, the reason I asked
that, Jeff.
the reason I asked that, Lisa, is because to me, that's kind of indicative of the whole mindset. There at Golf Channel. It's certain people are secondary or subservient, certain players, certain tournaments, certain tours are secondary, subservient, like that. And you can actually see it. I'm not the only one that, you know, I've got a platform, so I've got an advantage, but I have friends on Twitter, friends I play golf with, and they come back and they don't understand why it's done that way. Okay. They don't get that. They like to watch the LPGA tour better than like a Corn Ferry or event or the regular tour event. If Tiger's playing, the whole world changes, and you know that, and I know that, but sans that, they don't understand why it's done that way. And I've tried to explain it to them, but they don't work in the media business. And so it's, the explanation probably rings hollow to them.
Well, it's not just the times though, it's also the quality of the broadcast. You know, people think that the LPGA is so slow, and what they don't realize is the lack of cameras. Instead of going from one shot to the next, you know, quickly, like when you watch a PGA Tour event, because they have all these cameras loaded out there.
Right.
You're having to hold on a player and then go somewhere. The spacing in between shots is so much greater watching an LPGA event than a PGA Tour event, and that's simply because of a lack of cameras. That's another battle that the LPGA needs to fight with Golf Channel, because Golf Channel clearly doesn't care and isn't going to give them what it takes to have a good quality broadcast. I go crazy watching the LPGA coverage. I know how good the golf is. You know how good the golf is because you've seen it in person. For those folks who don't know, and they're only showing, you know, 4 players, and, you know, 4 players or 6 players, they're going to hit a lot of bad shots. They do on the PGA Tour. They rarely hit these great shots. Now, they do hit good recovery shots, but you don't have to show all these misses that they have to on the LPGA Tour, simply because they don't have enough cameras to showcase more of the field.
Right. I wrote a little joke here for you. You might not think it's that funny, but I thought HR stood for hiding reprehensible behavior. So
that's good. That's good.
When you were, I'm going to jump back to inside the Golf Channel now. When you were working there and you first went to HR, and then you went to NBC HR eventually, and all this, and you kept doing this, and it seemed like every time one of the, we're going to call them the suits would say, yeah, we'll look into it.
Yeah.
And then you would wait and wait and wait. And then sometimes you'd get a response. Sometimes you would get some sort of answer. Most of the time it was just passed off to somebody else or ignored. So how disappointing was that to you?
It wasn't disappointing. It was infuriating. And so, in fact, my first time, I'd never been to HR in my entire life in any job ever whatsoever. I always thought they just dealt with healthcare. You know, I didn't know. I wasn't going to take my problems to a department. They weren't that great. But when I started noticing that my job was now a question, that I was being pushed out, that's when I went. But I didn't go to Golf Channel HR because I didn't trust them, because what had happened with a friend of mine who did, and basically this egregious action that there was nothing happened to the person who committed the violation.
Right.
So I purposely avoided HR and I went to NBC compliance, and I went directly to the head of NBC compliance, and she couldn't have been better. And then all of a sudden she started doing what you were doing. she passed it along to Golf Channel HR even after I'd asked her not to. And so then it became a Golf Channel HR problem. And that's when things escalated and really became bad. That's when my situation with Molly Solomon got tremendously worse. That's, at that point, it didn't take long. It took like 6 months. And what amazes me is in this day and age that they still had the wherewithal to demote me after I had been after I'd gone to HR only 6 months prior. So I go to NBC Compliance, then meet with Golf Channel HR because NBC Compliance passed me off to Golf Channel HR. 6 months later, I'm demoted. I mean, nobody can ever tell me that was just because they were making budget cuts.
Yeah.
They were making budget cuts in the production department, but that didn't happen for a year later, and it wasn't happening to on-air talent. So, I mean, it was just so obvious, but because big corporations rarely lose these battles in a courtroom, they decided to go for it, and they did.
Yeah, that budget cut is always kind of a lame excuse, especially when you're talking companies as huge as NBC and Comcast and all that. They're not missing their Danish every morning at 8:30. You know what I mean? Lisa and I are going to take another break, and we're going to be back, and Lisa's going to stick around for after hours. But the book Troublemaker, it's highly recommended from my chair. Welcome back to Grilling at the Green. I'm JT. Today we've got Lisa Cornwell with us. Lisa is going to stick around for after hours because we both dressed for outdoors today. We're going to do that outdoors like that. Lisa's new book, Troublemaker. She was very kind to give me an advance copy so I could read it. And like I said, I read it once all the way through, and I started reading it again just to make sure I knew what the hell I was talking about, which some days I'm not sure about that. But
can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Can I turn this around?
Yeah.
What part upset you the most? What part bothered you?
Two things. I'm not a woman, so it's come from a different perspective, but I have been treated by executives and people that I worked with at times that this kind of wall builds up, this isolation wall around you when they really want you to move out. Things have happened to a point, and then they kind of, I don't want to say freeze you out. I saw that happening with you. And then the other part is when they talked about your personal life and you'd asked them not to. That's your business. You can share that with people when and if you want to in your life. That's nobody's business about who you work with. And that really just pissed me off. Because that is all, when they do that, that is designed to hurt you, to embarrass you, to humiliate you, even though you have nothing to be hurt or humiliated or embarrassed about. But they use it as that tool. Those two things really got my goat there. Maybe for other people that read the book, it might be something else. But I knew I had been in similar situations like you had been. Same outcome, just a different process. Okay. And you're always going to have that in the back of your mind when you do stuff for people, when you go to work for a company. You can't ever get rid of those thoughts. You try, but they're going to be in the back of the cabinet in your brain there. But then the personal stuff, when they sink to being personal about things and using your sexuality or whatever against you, that's just horse crap. Old cowboy term there, but that's it. So I don't know if that answers your question, Lisa.
No, I did. I appreciate you letting me ask. I was just curious.
Yeah, no, that you can always ask me questions. But like I said, I really think that outing you, if you will, let me use that term, I think that was reprehensible. And them trying to say, I didn't mean to, or, I slipped in the conversation, whatever types of excuses they gave you, they knew what the hell they were doing. So that's my thoughts on it. that and 25 cents will get you half a postage stamp. Anyway, when did you say in the book you've got a chapter that says reality sets in? After you'd been through all this and you'd been demoted and you'd had these fights in Chambly and travel boy Matt Gianella, we're trying to, they were ganging up on you, kiddo. And when did you finally go, I don't want to leave, but maybe it's best if I do, just for my own sanity and for your relationship with Sarah and your just daily life? That has to come when they push you so far. Eventually you have to say, I would love to stay and fight, but there's more people involved than just me.
Yeah, I'm not really one to walk away from a fight. I mean, I wasn't intimidated by those folks. And the only person who really had control of my job, Molly Solomon is mentioned a lot in this book, but her husband is actually, if you do a name count, her husband is actually mentioned more, Jeff Russell. He's the person who really changed my job. I mean, let's be honest, Matt Janella, or as you call him, Travel Boy, had no way to influence my job other than through another person. Brandel Chambly had no way to influence my job other than through another person. Every member of the boys club had no way to do it either. But Jeff, because I have no idea why. I don't really know him personally, although heard a lot of stories now. It makes a lot more sense. But he was the one that brought my job to a close at Golf Channel. He was the one who had the authority, and we talk a lot about nepotism in this book because Jeff Russell is married to Molly Solomon, which made no sense at all. First of all, he was my direct boss and the person who NBC on the organizational chart listed that I reported to. Yet his background has been as an editor of magazines and publications. In fact, he was the executive editor at Golf Channel before he became head of the newsroom. And so what happens when you upset or you get on the bad side of somebody who goes to bed every night with the person who controls your job? I mean, it's a no-win situation. So the minute that I challenged him on Chambly, the minute that the issue with Matt Janella, who is a very close friend, they do take trips together and post photos all the time. The minute that you have conflict with them, then you're on the outs because of, this whole nepotism and the way that it was working within Golf Channel. It was very 1950s, and the fact that it was still, I mean, not just from, the boys club culture, but the nepotism that existed. I can't believe that this was approved to allow Jeff to run the newsroom, working in tandem with his wife. Like it still makes no sense. Every HR person, and I talk about this in the book, just scratches their head on it, saying this would never happen in a big corporation today. So I don't know, but no, I was not ready to walk away from it. I was ready to stick up for myself. I was ready to stick up for the other folks who had also faced similar treatment. And I'm purposely naming their names just to let them know that this is what happens. If you don't want to be mentioned in a book, don't do bad things. It's that easy. It's really simple. I mean, I don't see anybody. I feel really comfortable that nobody's going to write a book about me or mention me in a book because I try to treat people as best I can. And when I mess up and I don't do something right, I'll be the first one to own it and apologize. I would never do to somebody what they did to me, ever. And that's from Janella, that's from Russell, that's from Chambly. I mean, I don't know. I'm not like those people, and I'm thankful that I'm not, to be honest.
I know you're not. And we're out of time on the regular show, but we've got no time limits on HR. So on after hours. God. Anyway, we're going to get out of here. Lisa.
Now I'm nervous.
Now you're nervous. Okay. Lisa's book, Troublemaker. I don't know if you can see this because of there she is. See?
That's what I look like when I'm not doing yard work.
Yeah. So it'll be out May 23rd. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, May 23rd, you can find it. I think you can pre-order it. You can do a lot of stuff. Or if you get lucky like me and actually have a show, they'll send you one to read. So that'll be out. But Lisa Cornwell, thank you. And we're going to be talking in about 2 minutes in after hours. That's going to wrap it up for us this week. We thank you for being with us. We'll be back next week with another edition of Grilling at the Green. Until then, take care and be kind. Welcome back to After Hours here on Grilling at the Green. I'm JT. Got my friend Lisa Cornwell, her new book, Troublemaker, and Tucker Booth lent a hand, our buddy there. It takes a while to do a book like this. This is not something you're going to kick out in 60 days.
No, it was quite a process. I mean, we were nonstop for over a year, and sorry, I just had a phone call come in and I declined it. I don't know if that affected the recording, but yeah, so we did the proposal to start, and that really does a lot of the legwork for the book and really shapes the outline. And then once we got the contract with the publisher, we knew that we had basically 7 months to kick out 70,000 words. So thankfully we already had this proposal that had, some of the heavy lifting. But then once you get into the writing process, and I wrote a lot of it, you start remembering more. And this happened, for me a lot during the early chapters in the book. I would remember more to stories and I would go back and expand on it. So it was a fun process. I joke that it's my one and only book because it was very tedious. So I'm glad that it's over. I'm glad that the editing part is out. And this is sort of my comfort zone, is talking about the book.
Yeah.
Rather than writing the book. But like, I'm really grateful for Tucker. He's become like a brother. You know how Tucker is, and he did such a fantastic job and was fully committed, even when, there were things that he would write and I would come back and change them or say, no, we have to start over here. This doesn't sound like me. We've got to, the process working back and forth with him. Honestly, Jeff, I wouldn't change a thing. It couldn't have gone better.
Well, good. Yeah. Well, you're both good people. So that makes it easier. You're not trying to hide anything. You're just telling the story. You mentioned a young lady in the book, which I've only met her, but it's kind of I followed her for a long time, Haley Moore. Haley's back on the Epson tour. Haley's had some issues in her life. She's a heavy set young lady. She's a good golfer. She's been ridiculed, bullied, and you bring that up in the book. I don't know if this makes sense to people. This is 6 degrees of separation stuff, but a good friend of mine that lives back in Pinehurst is friends with her mom. And that's how I kind of, and when she was up here a couple of years ago playing at the Classic, I went up, introduced myself to her and this and that. So I've always kind of followed her. I don't see why people would ridicule her. I mean, I understand why they do, but I don't see what's the impetus to actually do it. And that follows through with kind of the whole mindset of like what they did with you, what they've done with other women there at Golf Channel in the golfing industry. For the most part, there's a tremendous amount of talented women, whether they're playing or broadcasting or doing administration work like that. I don't get it. I mean,
I've never understood bullies. Bullies are just, I wish that I could take all of them on in this world. They feel like they have this power and this ability. And I guess it's kind of like somebody who has a cocaine addiction. For them, it's like they get this charge off of just being mean to people and seeing how much they can hurt them.
Yeah.
Haley's really special to me because she's the last interview that I ever did at Golf Channel. And so for anyone who ever said, well, Lisa was checked out, she didn't do her job in the end, you could never prove that. I mean, I really pushed to get that interview on there because her story is so important. And I think I'll always be tied to her because I will always remember that being, my last interview, and it was
Yeah.
emotional, the story that I really cared about. But she's a great young woman. She's a great golfer, but more importantly, she's just a human being. And people they have ridiculed her for, I guess, being overweight. She's what, 6'2", so she just doesn't look like every other woman. It's horrible, but she has persevered and she's gotten through it. I'm sure she still battles with stuff every day that we all don't know about. So, I always want to be a friend and an ally. Her parents are phenomenal. You mentioned them, and like, I'll always be cheering for Haley. She's a phenomenal talent, and I want to see her back out on the LPGA tour. She's young. There's plenty of time, and I have no doubt that
You'll
we'll
be all
see.
right.
I'm sure. Yeah, yeah. She's just,
You'll be all right. But speaking of
she will.
addiction, I want to talk to you about your peanut butter addiction now, because I have the same problem.
I thought you were going to say Johnny Walker.
Yeah. No, we'll get to that maybe off the air. But I found it so funny when you're talking about being there with Secretary Clinton eating the peanut butter out of the jar, because I catch a lot of hell around here. Because, well, let's put it this way. Our daughter gave me for Christmas a couple of years ago, she gave me this gold dip spoon, and it says Dad's peanut butter spoon right in the middle. So, and I did that, folks, as a tease, because I'm not going to tell you what it all means, but you have to read the book. But it's pretty funny, part of it there, and to eat peanut butter. Right? Is it Skippy or Jif? I'm a Jif guy.
I don't remember what the peanut butter Hillary and I ate. I think it was Jeff. I remember it was a really big jar.
Yeah.
That was when Bill was still governor. He'd just been elected president. And I'll tell the story of after golf one day, and Hillary and I were talking in the kitchen and started eating peanut butter. I'm sure she was looking at me going, wow, we need to get her some real food, because she's eating all of our peanuts. She's eating this out of peanut butter. But it's a great story, and I'm really fortunate. I've been influenced by Hillary all my life, and probably the most mischaracterized person in the history of, I don't know. Did your
relationship, excuse me, sorry, because you're related to them, but also your affiliation, did have people use that against you at times?
Oh, I've had a lot of people say, I can't believe she wrote the foreword. Why would you alienate, 60 or 70% of men? It's just so silly. I'm really tired of the political culture that we live in. If somebody isn't going to read the book because Hillary wrote the foreword, maybe they need to just expand their way of thinking.
Yeah.
It's over the top. And I gave this example to somebody on Twitter yesterday, and I will credit him. He came back and said, that's a fair point, I will read it. But he told me he wouldn't read it because she wrote the foreword. And I said, look, I really hope that people aren't that small-minded. And I gave him an example of Lexi Thompson, because Lexi's played golf with Trump, and obviously I'm not a Trump supporter or fan. Sure. But if Lexi wrote a book, and because of her relationship with Donald Trump, if Donald Trump wrote the foreword, I wouldn't sit there and go, I'm not going to buy the book, or I'm not going to read the book. That's silliness. Yeah. This is Lexi's story. This is my story. This isn't Hillary's story. She wrote the foreword because she obviously has a voice on this subject. She's somebody who I love and respect. But if that's going to stop somebody from buying the book, then we need to reassess how we're sort of looking at things, I think. But again, I'll give credit to the man who changed his mind and said, okay, that's good, I'll buy it. So
I actually read that.
Yeah.
I read that. I thought that was big of him to do that. In the book, you talk about quiet support from the other staff members at Golf Channel. We touched on that a little bit in the regular show, Lisa, but do you still get, I don't know if you want to call it, reports from them quietly through clandestine means like texting or emails or something to say, that one, at first it was, yeah, that happened to me, or here's my experience, here's my story. And then some of them that are still there going, this crap's still happening. I mean, is that dialogue going on at
Well,
times?
a lot of those people don't work there anymore. And most of the people who, it happened mostly to people who worked in the building. So in studio, in production, in news, in special projects. So I don't see a lot of those folks anymore. I'll be interested once the book comes out, how many more people reached out. But I will say, Jeff, at least 30 women reached out to me from Golf Channel, either past or present, when I first spoke out about it. So I don't know how many more people there are. And with the operations moving to Stanford, everything is sort of different now in terms of the number of people who are there. The people who
Right.
I really see most are at LPGA events, and that's because of Sarah. You know, I still go to LPGA events, but they're so isolated from really the executives and management. They kind of live in their own little bubble,
Yeah.
and they don't experience. They never did experience that as much as me, just because they weren't in the place where most of this stuff was occurring. So you can ask me in a month or so how many more people reach out, but
Sure.
there's always been a great number.
Was being called home probably the most embarrassing situation? I mean, there was lots going on. There was emotions. There was trying to right wrongs and all that. But when they called you home from that tournament, that was really public. That just laid it out there for everybody.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh no, that fired me up.
yeah,
That gave me energy to fight back even harder. That was the biggest mistake that they made, not just legally. Well, no, it wasn't the biggest mistake they made legally. That happened several years prior. But for somebody with my personality to challenge me that way and try to do it publicly with a statement that Jeff Russell wrote, that he put out, that was false, and the
yes,
player and the club fitter both called him out as being false. I mean, I was like, game on. You know, that's the worst thing you can do with somebody with me. No, it wasn't embarrassing, because I knew, and all the players knew, and most of the fans. I mean, if you go back and read those comments, Golf Channel Mizuno got absolutely slammed on social media for the most part, because it
yep,
was very clear what was going on. And no, it gave me energy. I think the part that was the most embarrassing was when they took me off of NCAA's that were taking place in my hometown where I played college golf. And that was a very purposeful thing that they orchestrated. That's when I knew that my job was over, as I
yeah,
talk about in the book.
yeah. And what we're referring to prior to that, there was a situation, and I'm trying not to give away the book, you know what I mean, Lisa, but there was a
Yeah.
situation with a player at a tournament. She ended up having to basically get her own clubs. That's another whole story, where the LPGA players don't get the same types of perks and benefits as the PGA Tour guys do when it comes to club manufacturers and that type of thing. So I'm going to leave it there, because it's a really good story, and it really, to me, lays out part of the situation, that the differential between the men's and women. It's like that.
Yeah.
And then how you were treated afterwards. So that's a long-winded tease, but I think it's a very, the whole book is important, but I think that's a really critical point on a timeline that should tell people how things really work.
Well, it's chapter 1,
Yeah,
so we
yeah,
set the stage early for a
yeah,
reason.
yeah. I
And
don't
Jeff,
think,
I hate to do this, but I have a 2 o'clock podcast that I'm supposed to do, and they're calling me for the third time.
okay. Well, maybe we can pick this up again. Lisa's new
Well,
book.
yeah, we have to do it when it comes out, so we can reveal some of this stuff,
Yeah,
because
we
it
can do
comes
that.
out, as you said, in just a few weeks.
Yeah, we'll do that. Troublemaker. No, I'm not calling her troublemaker. Well, I have called her troublemaker. But anyway, Lisa Cornwell's new book,
I answer to
Troublemaker.
it.
Yeah, she'll do that. And she likes New York strip steaks and Johnny Walker. I'll tell you that. All right, Lisa,
Yes,
thank you
sir.
so much, my dear.